welcome to the Farmer Supply Association Agri Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. Harvest is advancing really well. We've really had a good run of weather, very little rain, which we kind of needed some for some soybeans, but for rice harvest it's been awesome. I was out in the Wiener area this morning and there was a guy already going at like 10 o'clock. That's, have days like that, and on top of that, the dryers and elevators and everything, don't have long lines this year because our rice acreage is down. So it's really been a good harvest season as far as getting it done, and things are happening really fast on that front. I want to switch and talk a little bit about the yields we're seeing out there so far this season. I guess I would call them inconsistent. They're generally off. Our yields are down this year for the most part. They're not all down, but I would call them inconsistent and generally off somewhat. So that's kind of the overview of what we're seeing in yields. When yields are off, the first thing I usually think of is weather. So I keep a record of weather in my calendar, and so I went to that calendar book and started looking at late June, July into August and see what I was seeing. And that mid-July to late July period just really kind of stood out at me. It really showed a lot of what was going on. It's not all of it, but it's a good part of it. We really had some hot temperatures during that period, starting about the 16th of July and going till the 30th. A lot of lows, and we always talk about nighttime lows. They were very, very warm during that time period. Ranging generally from 75 to 80. I think even looking at Newport and Jonesboro, I look at both of those. Jonesboro even was in the low 80s a couple of nights in there, and Newport generally 75 to about 78 or 79 just almost every night during that period. So, that's not really good for that time of the year, the reproductive stage of rice. So I think that's a lot what was going on. Since that time, Jared Hartke, who is the extension rice specialist, has put out some information about some of the things he's seen out there that contribute to this. So, while the heat has been a big part of it, there's some other things been going on too. So he kind of described a lot of those things, and I'm just going to go over some of the things that he talked about. This is nothing original for me. This part here is what Jared was talking about in his newsletter. First thing he talked about was twin stems, and apparently those are pretty common, and especially in the real low rice yields that he's looking at. The twin stems have been pretty common. And with twin stems, a stem is not successful in producing what it should, and it produces another higher stem up the plant when this happens. That first initial stem just doesn't do, for whatever reason, and we'll talk about some of those reasons, it doesn't produce like it should. So, that plant's going to try to get those yields up there, so it's going to produce another stem, in place of it to try to overcome that. So this is generally up the plant. If you look on that stem, you'll see higher up the plant another stem there that's originated and trying to compensate. There's several causes for this, potential causes for that. So a lot of times we don't know what causes it. We just know that there's several things we've seen that probably contribute to it. I've seen these in fields before. I always threw it off on herbicide injury of some type, just because it was so odd looking, I guess. You thought it might be herbicide related, and it could be herbicide related. Herbicide injury is one of the main causes. Also, diseases like straight head might be a potential cause of it. Insects like stalk borers, just various things can be causes of it. But again, that's the twin stem, and that just tells you that something's went wrong, and that plant's trying to compensate, but it may not compensate as well as it would have, if that original stem would have just done like it was supposed to. So again, that's the twin stems. Second thing I want to talk about is low number of grains, and this also you could call it just short panicles, as another way of describing that, but a low number of grains. A couple of major causes of that: late nitrogen, and especially like if you get wet, and you're wanting to wait for dry ground, and you can't get it, and sometimes you keep waiting and your nitrogen is later than you'd like to see it. And sometimes it's close to green ring already before you get your pre-flood nitrogen out there. So this can be a very big contributor to the short panicles and the low number of grains. There will be a lower number of grains per panicle, be smaller panicles. The odd thing about this, or somewhat odd, I think, is most of the grains are going to be filled in this situation. There's less grains, but they're going to be filled better. And that was kind of fooling me. I know, you may remember last month when I was talking about, I felt like the yields maybe were going to be better than expected. Well, I was wrong on that because I was seeing all these panicles that were filled pretty good. And the thing that was fooling me is there weren't as many grains, so I really wasn't paying as much attention to the length of those panicles, and just seeing them feel that good, I thought, well, we've got a pretty good crop out there, and wasn't as good as I thought because, again, those shorter panicles, they feel the grains better, but there's just not as many of them. Another thing that's kind of really close to this, just with real similar symptoms than the late nitrogen, is cloudy weather. That can contribute to really cause the same type of symptoms, the shorter panicles and feel good, but again, shorter panicles. The main period we're looking at where this can result is the 2 weeks before and after green ring. So 2 weeks before green ring on to 2 weeks past green ring. If you have a lot of cloudy weather in that period, you're going to again have some of these similar symptoms as we do with the late nitrogen. This seemed to be more prevalent, I think, on the early planted rice, it seems like, and we've noticed that a little bit. Maybe the early rice not as good, and it's kind of gotten a little better as we've moved on. So, that could be a contributor there, as reason why this happened. So, again, low number of grains caused primarily by nitrogen going out too late or cloudy weather. So that's another contributor to these lower than average yields. The next thing is excessive blanks. I've had some farmers talk to me about, having excessive blanks. I've seen the lower number of grains in the shorter panicles, but I had some guys talk to me about, excessive blanks. I know one called me in particular late in the season on some fields that weren't doing good, and they were talking about how many blanks they had. So that was a little different than what I was seeing in some of these other fields. Several potential causes of these, late herbicide applications of herbicides that shouldn't go out that late. Also pop-up thunderstorms like during flowering, like during the middle of the day. I don't think neither of these causes were really major causes of the excessive blanks, but they are potential causes and could have been, contributing on some of the fields. Probably the main one was, as I talked about earlier, the high nighttime temperatures. These high nighttime temperatures affect pollen formation, also pollen germination. So, if these things don't happen, we're going to have a lot of blanks. So that's kind of what happened. We had all that heat and the pollen didn't form or germinate. So that was a big cause to it. Another thing related to the heat I thought was kind of interesting, and I was talking to Jared Hartke back, during early harvest, and he was talking about this in some of the row rice that he looked at. And, on row rice, most people collect water, let it, collect in the bottom of the field, to save it, don't let it run off. And so the bottom of the field's got a flood on it, and the top of the field, you're running water through it. And you would think that the bottom would be better, but in a year like this one, it may be different because that water just kind of stagnates down there at the bottom, and it gets so hot, it basically is almost like cooking, the plant, and can affect this pollen formation and germination as well. So, that's something we need to be thinking about right there is hot water, not only on row rice, but in the bottom of paddy rice fields as well. So where that water's just sitting there, it just gets really hot and can affect the plant. Whereas in the top part of the field, it's kind of running through and it stays a little cooler that way. So you're not going to have the problem if it's running a lot of the time instead of just stagnant down there getting hot. So that was an interesting thing that Jared brought up to me about the row rice. So I just want to mention that as well. And that's another part of that heat factor that I was talking about. So again, twin stems, low number of grains, excessive blanks, just kind of the general categories we're talking about right here. Just as a general overview, if you have very few blanks in the field, something happened during the early reproductive stage, is when your main problem occurred. If you have excessive blanks, then that probably happened during the heading and flowering stage. So that's kind of a general overview of those. A good thing this year, the milling yields are definitely up. I mean, everything I'm hearing is much better than it's been the last couple of years, a lot in the mid 50s and things like that. So good to hear that on milling. I want to touch real quickly on soybean harvest stage. I'm getting a lot of calls on this. Just don't want people to do that too early. You can lose a lot of yield. The tests I've seen are just kind of surprising how much yield you can lose if you put the gramoxone or whatever desiccant you're using. It can be sharpened, sodium chlorate, AIM. There's several options right there, but don't go too early. You want that plant or those pods, those beans, to be at least 6.5, which means the seed within that pod is kind of separated from the pod. You'll be turning pretty yellow by that time. And if you open that pod up, that seed is kind of a glossy look and it's just loose in there. It'll fall right out. So that's the absolute earliest you want to apply these harvest stage. Really even like to be a little later than that. The University of Arkansas recommends 7.0, stage 7.0. And at 7.0, one of the pods on the plant is a mature brown color. So that's how you tell, growth stage 7.0, R7 is by that brown pod, on the plant, at least one on that main stem. So again, let's not go too early with these harvest stage. I mean, there can be a big benefit to them, but you can lose way more yield than you would ever think if you get out there before stage 6.5. So keep that in mind. And hopefully this harvest will keep going well, and we'll get through this year. And everybody knows the economy is not good right now, but hopefully things get better here pretty soon. This has been Randy Klepechka with your Farmer Supply Association Agri Report.